Welcome back to the channel. And I just had one of the weirdest comic book reading experiences of my life. X-Terminators #1, Leah Williams, Carlos Gomez. Is this the worst X-Men comic in the history of X-Men comics? X-Men have been around a long time. We've had some particularly bad X-Men comics in the past 2 or 3 years. X-Corp #1 kind of comes into mind, all of the Children of the Atom stuff. Legion of X, there's some really bad stuff. Excalibur, Trial of Magneto, also Leah Williams. This one might take the cake. I definitely need to hear from you guys. Is this the worst X-Men comic of all times? I think it might be. And the weirdest part is the art in this is actually pretty good. Carlos Gomez, I feel you. I feel so bad for you. You put your heart and soul to this comic book. It looks pretty darn good despite having a terrible script to work with. But you're never going to get the acclaim that you deserve being on a comic book like this. And Jordan White knows that. Jordan White is so incompetent that he actually puts this thing over. There's actually 2 distinct stories in this comic book. One of them that is complete cringe, just completely cringy. And then the second story is utterly incomprehensible. I don't even know what's going on here. Hopefully you guys can give me a clue. Leah Williams has promoted this as being a big team up of Boom Boom, Dazzler, Jubilee, and I believe X-23. Although X-23 is not really in this comic book until the very last page, despite being on the cover. And it turns out Dazzler has a boyfriend and she walked in on him talking to another girl, so she assumes that he cheated and she throws his stuff out. And she needs a girls' night out. And that's really, I guess, where the problems start, because none of these characters act or sound like themselves. I think they act and sound like Leah Williams. I think this is just Leah Williams hanging out with herself. So she calls her best bae Jubilee, and this is what happens. You're not going to believe this stuff. I need to be around friends. Drunk. I need to be drunk around friends. Jubilee says, well, I know Boom Boom's not doing anything important right now. And Boom Boom, totally in character, says, fuck you. Dazzler says, thanks, Jubilee. I'll text you the address for Mr. B's. It's a karaoke bar right around the corner from my apartment in West Hollywood. Jubilee, who is a single mother and quite doting and actually responsible with her son Shogo, says, want to go out with me and Dazzler tonight? Boom Boom, totally in character. I got shit to do. Like what? Like finishing my beer first. I'll meet you guys there. And that's essentially like what the first third of this comic book is. It's probably about the first third. And it's pure cringe, these characters talking to each other. Somehow, Leah Williams has debased these characters into being sorority, mean girl versions, I guess, of Leah Williams, who wants to go out and get plastered all the time. The only thing that doesn't happen in this comic book, but I do imagine it will happen during the miniseries at some point, is the girls never make out. Shockingly, but the story does get more and more cringe as we go along. Boom Boom arrives at the karaoke bar 4 beers later because she's pre-gaming. You dumb bitches. You should have told me the dress code was depression. You look like if Barbie was a sex addict. Thank you. Oh no, we didn't even order yet. On the house for being such a loyal patron of Mr. B's these past few months. Boom Boom, you look like the final stop on a bimboification spectrum. Ooh, even better. I'll be honest, I'm gonna drink until you have to carry me home tonight. I'm in. I'm already drunk. And you look like Glinda the Good Witch's porn parody. Cheers, ladies. This didn't have to fail. It didn't have to be so cringe. If it could have actually had the voice of the characters, and maybe they were having a girls' night out and they were having some fun and doing some things that maybe we wouldn't have expected. But that's not Boom Boom, it's not Jubilee, and it's certainly not Dazzler. The attempts at comedy in this just fall flat because Leah Williams isn't funny. There are funny women out there, and there are funny stories of this nature that have been told. Bridesmaids comes to mind. I actually like that movie quite a bit. And the humor there absolutely lands every single time. This is Leah Williams trying to be Tina Fey, but failing spectacularly because she's not humorous and she's a terrible writer. And it turns out those drinks they had, they were laced by Dazzler's ex-boyfriend. Hey, babe. Alex, what? Take the shots. Every last drop. You drugged us? Well, how else would we transport you? It's not as if you'd be particularly accommodating had I asked. Had you asked? What? See? Exactly. This is what I'm talking about. You never trusted me. What the fuck are you up to, Alex? Let's not find out. So it turns out Alex is in fact a vampire, although we do see him in the daylight in the very beginning when she's throwing all the stuff out the windows. But the reason he can be a daylight is because he has this amulet, and one of the characters, I guess it's added in through some exposition, recognizes the amulet, and that's why he can take sunlight. So her ex-boyfriend, who was apparently cheating on her, drugged them so that they could kidnap 3 mutants with superhuman abilities. Obviously, this isn't going to work out for her. But I do have another example of why Leah Williams shouldn't be writing anything or ever attempting to tell like comedy in a comic. And truly, she probably shouldn't ever be writing a comic. This is a skit in a movie that you will probably recognize from a lot of different films that have a nice comedic gag like this. We have this lady, she's walking her dog at night saying it's time for a twerkulator. And all of a sudden, the girls are using their powers in the bar. And there's this big flash of light. And she goes, let's go this way, buddy. This plays out quite comedically in a movie, but in a comic book where you have an action-based storytelling medium, but is static unto itself, like a gag like that doesn't really work. You actually have to have comic book writers to be able to do effective gags that work in comic books. Shockingly, Leah Williams is not a comic book writer. So every piece of comedy in this opening third act, which is absolutely cringe through and through the entire way, it's just like, oh my God, who talks like this? Oh, Leah Williams and her buddies do when they're out doing shots Patron trying to get nailed on a Friday night. Cool. The unfortunate part is Leah Williams and her buddies like aren't heroes. They're not mutants, and they don't feel at home within the X-Men universe. And that's why the story ends up being so off-putting. It's actually pretty hard to read getting through that first third. When you get to the second third, this thing is absolutely incomprehensible. All of a sudden, Boom Boom, Jubilee, and Dazzler are in 3 different locations being attacked by 3 different sets of monsters, but none of them are vampires. As we go through, we kind of learn apparently that people are watching them like it's the Truman Show or something, or there are spectators watching what's going on because apparently they have ended up in a giant maze, and all of a sudden there's monster trucks, monsters all over the place, and they're just running around with no explanation whatsoever. This is the worst example of literary nonsense I've seen in quite some time. Literary nonsense can be very effective when you have a writer that knows how to employ that technique. The best example being, obviously, Alice in Wonderland. But here you have an absolute hack in Leah Williams trying to use literary nonsense, or maybe she's trying to tell a story and it just comes off as nonsensical, and they're just doing stuff to do stuff, and she discovers an animal and she's like, oh, they're using you as bait. It was like, where did you come up with this? Oh, you just decided they were using them as bait, and they all end up in this monster truck together, and they're going to ram the wall, and when they hit it, Boom Boom does not have her seatbelt on. She flies through the windshield, goes splat against the wall, but doesn't die, even though that doesn't match her mutant powers. Apparently, established character powers doesn't matter in Leah Williams' story. And of course, we get to see Boom Boom like vomiting all over the ground. There's blood. Well, duh. You really should have worn your seatbelt, Tabby. No, and fuck you both. No, I mean, a lot of blood, not ours. And then they're told they passed some type of entry test to get into something that has not been explained whatsoever, not even a single attempt, because nothing makes sense at all about the story being told. The voices are off. There's no compelling story. There's no real hook here. If you want to see what Leah Williams and her friends do on a Friday night where they put all those actions into characters that aren't them, then you have at least a third of a comic book, I guess. And then we get to this big maze thing with monster trucks that comes out of nowhere. This is absolute nonsense. How does Leah Williams still have a job? She has failed on every single project that she's done in the X-Men office. The one thing she's done at Marvel Comics that has been somewhat successful was Amazing Mary Jane. Leah Williams came from Hollywood, and that was kind of a weird meta story about Hollywood. So I guess it was stuff that she knew about and was able to successfully put into a comic book that didn't absolutely suck. But every other thing that Leah Williams has written is absolute gibberish bullshit. Like, how is this stuff still being printed? Is this the worst X-Men comic of all times? Is it the worst X-Men comic of the last 10 years? Maybe the last year. It's got to be up there. This thing deserves an award. It will absolutely make my top 3 worst comic books of the year. We're getting to the end of 2022. I guarantee you, this thing is an absolute contender. Complete and utter gibberish. Why has all this happened? Because the X-Men line is being mismanaged monumentally by Jordan White, the group editor. He has brought in so many untalented people and gives them chance after chance after chance. If you would like to see Jordan White's incompetence in his own words, I did this video kind of talking about what was going on with the X-Men, specifically with Jordan White and his terrible leadership. If you don't see the link right here, there's also a link in the video description.